You're a nobody. You'll never make it, my dad said and kicked me out. I just smiled and left. Yesterday, he showed up at my office begging when he realized that My father's voice echoed through the tiny living room, his face twisted with disgust as he pointed toward the door. Get out of my house! I stood there, frozen, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I had expected disappointment from him. I had expected anger. But this? The sheer venom in his voice, the finality of his words, it cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Dad, Just nothing, he snapped, stepping forward. You're 18. You have no job, no future, no ambition. You're nothing but a leech. His glare was unwavering, as if daring me to prove him wrong. Go out there and see for yourself. See how the real world treats nobodies like you. I swallowed hard. My mother sat on the couch, her gaze fixed on the floor, her hands wringing in her lap. She wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't speak. My little brother peeked out from the hallway, wide-eyed, but said nothing. No one was going to stop this. I should have begged. I should have fought to stay. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Not because I was happy. Not because it didn't hurt. But because I knew, that one day, I would make him eat those words. I turned on my heel, grabbed my backpack, and walked out the door. I didn't look back. That was the last time I ever set foot in that house. The first night was the hardest. I had nowhere to go, no money in my pocket, and no one to call. I wandered through town aimlessly, the reality of my situation sinking in with every step. The streets felt colder than usual, the city lights harsher. At some point, I found myself in a 24-hour diner, nursing a glass of water and trying to make sense of my options. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, noticed I hadn't ordered anything. You waiting on someone, honey? She asked. I shook my head. She hesitated for a moment, then walked away. A few minutes later, she came back and placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of me. On the house, she said softly. I wanted to refuse out of pride, but my stomach growled before I could. I muttered a quiet thank you and ate every bite. That was the first kindness I had received since stepping out of my father's house. But kindness wouldn't keep me off the streets. I needed money. A job. A plan. For the next few days I slept wherever I could, a park bench, an abandoned building, even a bus station when the rain got too bad. I showered in public restrooms when I found one clean enough. My pride shrank with each passing day. Then, on the fifth night, I found myself standing in front of a worn-down garage on the outskirts of town. A sign in the window read, "Help wanted. No experience necessary." I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and walked inside. I had nothing left to lose. The garage smelled like oil, metal, and sweat. Inside, the sound of clanking tools and muffled rock music filled the air. A burly man in grease-stained overalls stood near an open hood, wiping his hands on a rag. He glanced up as I stepped inside, raising an eyebrow. You lost, kid? I shook my head. I saw the sign outside. You need help? He studied me for a moment, his gaze flicking over my wrinkled shirt, the backpack slung over my shoulder, the exhaustion written all over my face. He wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what kind of situation I was in. You ever worked in a garage before? No, I admitted. But I can learn. I just need a chance. He exhaled through his nose and tossed the rag onto the workbench. You got a name? Nick. Well, Nick, I ain't in the business of charity, he said, crossing his arms. You screw up, you're gone. You show up late, you're gone. You act like you're too good to get your hands dirty, you're gone. Got it? I nodded. He stared at me a second longer before jerking his head toward the back of the shop. You start now. Grab that broom and clean up the mess near the lift. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was something. For the next few weeks, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I arrived before sunrise and left well after closing. I scrubbed floors, fetched tools, ran errands, anything to prove I was worth keeping around. My hands, once soft and unscarred, became calloused and stained with grease. My body ached every night, but I welcomed the pain. It meant I was building something. And slowly, the boss, his name was Frank, started trusting me with more than just a broom. He taught me how to change oil, how to replace brake pads, how to listen to the subtle sounds of an engine to diagnose a problem. He didn't praise much, but when he did, it meant something. "You're not half bad, kid," he muttered one evening as I wiped my hands on a rag, exhausted but satisfied with the work I'd done. That was the closest thing to approval I had ever gotten from a father figure. I saved every penny I made, spending only on food and a cheap motel room when I could afford it. I had a long way to go, but for the first time since my father threw me out, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. And I swore to myself, I would never be powerless again. Months passed. Then a year. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was learning. Frank started letting me work on actual cars, and soon, customers began requesting me by name. I had an instinct for machines, a way of figuring things out faster than most. If something was broken, I could fix it. If I didn't know how, I stayed up all night reading manuals until I did. But no matter how much I improved, I knew working in a garage forever wasn't the end goal. I wanted more. One night, as I was locking up, Frank tossed me a cold soda and leaned against the workbench. "You ever thought about doing something bigger?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You got a brain, kid. You learn fast. You don't want to be working with busted carburetors for the next 30 years, do you?" I shook my head. "No." "Then what's the plan?" I didn't have an answer. That thought haunted me for weeks. I had been so focused on surviving that I hadn't stopped to think about the future. Frank's words stuck with me. If I didn't make a plan, I'd end up stuck, just like the guys who'd been working there for decades, bitter and exhausted. Then, as fate would have it, my opportunity came. One evening, a sleek black Mercedes rolled into the shop. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, frowning at his phone while tossing his keys onto the counter. "Battery's dead," he muttered. "And I need this fixed fast." I was wiping my hands when I saw him, and for some reason, something about the way he carried himself struck me. This guy wasn't just another customer. He owned something. "You in a rush?" I asked. He finally looked up at me, sizing me up like I was some nobody mechanic. "I have a meeting in 2 hours. You think you can get it done by then?" I could have just said yes. But instead, something bold came over me. "I'll fix it in 1," I said. "But tell me something first." He raised an eyebrow. "What? How does someone like you get to own a car like this?" He smirked. "I build businesses. Small ones, big ones, doesn't matter. I see an opportunity, and I take it." An idea clicked in my head. I fixed his car in record time, and before he left, I made sure to ask one last question. "What would it take for someone like me to build something like you did?" He studied me for a moment, then pulled out a business card. "If you're serious, come find me," he said. "Most people won't. But something tells me you're not most people." And just like that, my life took a turn. I didn't know it then, but that encounter was the start of everything. The beginning of an empire. I had just found my way in. I stared at the business card for days. It felt like a ticket to another world, a world where people like my father never decided my worth, where success wasn't about luck but strategy. The name on the card read Jonathan Mercer, venture capitalist. I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I knew it was big. Frank noticed I was distracted and finally asked, "You got something on your mind, kid?" I told him about Mercer. About the offer. Frank just nodded, wiping oil from his hands. "You thinking of taking it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Feels like I'd be stepping into something way over my head." Frank gave a rare chuckle. "Kid, you walked in here months ago knowing nothing. Now you're my best damn mechanic. If you think for a second you can't learn your way up, you're dumber than you look." That was all I needed to hear. The next morning, I took a deep breath and called Mercer's office. A receptionist answered, but instead of brushing me off like I expected, she said, Mr. Mercer mentioned you might call. Can you come in this afternoon?" I wasn't ready. But I went anyway. Mercer's office was nothing like the garage. Sleek, modern, and filled with people in suits moving with purpose. I felt out of place in my work jeans and worn-out boots, but I walked in with my head high. Mercer was waiting. He leaned back in his chair, watching as I sat down across from him. "You actually came," he said, amused. "I did." He smirked. "All right, kid. Let's see what you're made of." What followed was the hardest hour of my life. He threw question after question at me. "What do you know about business? What would you do if someone handed you $10,000 right now? What's the biggest risk you've ever taken?" I answered honestly. I told him I didn't know much about business, but I knew how to work harder than anyone else. I told him I would take that $10,000 and invest it into something I believed in. And I told him that the biggest risk I had ever taken was betting on myself when no one else did. For the first time, Mercer leaned forward. "You've got guts," he said. "And guts get you through the door. But brains keep you in the room. So tell me, are you willing to learn?" "Yes." That was all he needed to hear. "I'm not going to hand you anything," he said. "But I'll teach you how to earn it. You'll start as an intern. No pay. You learn everything: finance, negotiation, how deals work. Most guys would quit in a week. Think you can handle it?" I met his gaze. "I don't quit." He grinned. "Good. Let's get to work." The next few months were brutal. By day, I worked at the garage. By night, I studied. Mercer gave me books, articles, spreadsheets, things that made my head spin. I learned how money moved, how deals were made, how people played the game. It was like seeing the world through a new lens. Suddenly, I understood why people like my father stayed stuck while others built empires. It wasn't about luck, it was about knowledge, connections, and playing smarter than the other guy. I made mistakes. I embarrassed myself in meetings. But I never backed down. And slowly I got better. One night, after reviewing a deal for hours, Mercer finally leaned back and nodded. "Not bad, kid," he said. "You might actually make something of yourself." It was the closest thing to approval I had ever gotten from a mentor. But I wasn't satisfied. I didn't just want to make something of myself. I wanted to own everything they said I never could. I wanted power. And for the first time, I realized I was going to get it. Months turned into a year. I wasn't just an intern anymore. I was Mercer's right hand. I learned how to spot a good deal, how to negotiate, how to make money move. More importantly, I learned how the powerful think. One day, Mercer called me into his office and tossed a file onto the desk. "You've been watching. Now it's time to act." I opened the file. A struggling auto parts company. Decent potential, bad management. "You tell me," Mercer said. "Is this worth saving?" I studied the numbers, the trends. Then I looked up and shook my head. "No. But it's worth taking." Mercer grinned. "Then take it." It was my first deal, my first real step into the world of business. I negotiated, maneuvered, and within weeks, I owned the company for pennies on the dollar. For the first time, I was the one making the decisions. And it felt good. I was still climbing, but I knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. The auto parts company was just the start. Once I had control, I stripped it down, cutting wasteful spending and restructuring operations. What everyone else saw as a failing business, I saw as an opportunity. Within 6 months, it was turning a profit. Mercer watched closely. "You're catching on faster than I expected," he admitted one evening. "Most people hesitate. You don't." I shrugged. "I can't afford to." He smirked. "That's why you're going to win." From there, things moved fast. I flipped the company for triple what I paid. With that money, I reinvested, buying into another struggling business. Then another. I built a reputation. People started to notice me. And with each deal, each win, I felt something shifting inside me. The fear, the doubt that had once held me back, it was gone. I wasn't the scared kid my father threw out. I was becoming something else entirely. One night, I stood in my first real office, looking out over the city skyline. I had gone from sleeping on park benches to making deals with millionaires. But I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. I wanted more. And I knew exactly where I was headed. Straight to the top. Success is addictive. The more I built, the more I wanted. Within a few years, I had carved out a name for myself. I was no longer just a hustler picking up scraps. I was a player. My company owned multiple businesses, from tech startups to real estate. I had the connections, the capital, and the power to make things happen. But power isn't given, it's taken. And I was about to take my biggest risk yet. There was a corporation on the verge of collapse, an old manufacturing giant that had been bleeding money for years. The market had written it off. But I saw something no one else did. If I could turn it around, it would cement me as a real force in the industry. Mercer warned me. "This is too big, too risky," he said. "If it goes wrong, you lose everything." I met his gaze. "Then I won't lose." I gathered investors, negotiated aggressive buyouts, and within months, the company was mine. Then came the hard part, fixing it. I worked day and night, restructuring, cutting unnecessary expenses, modernizing production. Every decision felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and it would all come crashing down. And for a while, it almost did. There were moments when it seemed like Mercer was right, like I had finally overreached. But failure wasn't an option. Then, in the third quarter, the numbers changed. Profits soared. Stock prices climbed. Investors who once doubted me now scrambled to buy in. I hadn't just saved the company. I had rebuilt it into something bigger, stronger. And with that, my empire was officially born. I was no longer just rich. I was untouchable. But as I stood in my penthouse office, watching my success unfold, I couldn't help but wonder, did my father even know? Did he have any idea that the son he threw away had built an empire from nothing? I was about to find out. Because fate had a cruel sense of humor. And soon my past was about to walk through my office door. Success had erased my father from my mind for years. I never looked back. Never wondered where he was or what he was doing. The day he kicked me out was the day he stopped existing to me. Until yesterday. I was in my office, reviewing a multi-million-dollar acquisition, when my assistant buzzed in. "Sir, there's someone here asking to see you." "Do I have an appointment with them?" I asked without looking up. "No, but he insists it's important." I sighed. "Then tell him to. He says his name is Robert Carter." I froze. The name sent a shock through my spine, one I hadn't felt in years. My father. I glanced at the security feed on my monitor, and there he was, standing in my lobby. The same man who threw me out like garbage all those years ago. Only now, he didn't look so powerful. His once proud shoulders were hunched. His suit, cheap and ill-fitting, hung off him. His face, once sharp with arrogance, was lined with stress and desperation. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smirk forming. So, the mighty Robert Carter had fallen. I pressed the intercom. "Send him in." A minute later, the door opened, and my father stepped inside. He didn't recognize me at first. His eyes scanned the lavish office, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the custom-built desk worth more than his entire net worth. He swallowed hard. "You're the CEO?" I steepled my fingers. "That's what it says on the door." His face drained of color as realization struck. The son he had abandoned, the nobody, was now the man sitting behind the desk he needed something from. I let the silence stretch until he finally spoke. I didn't know. Clearly. He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Nick, I didn't come here to dredge up the past. I need—" He hesitated, forcing the words out. "I need a job." The amusement in my chest burned hotter. Robert Carter, the man who once called me worthless, was now begging for my help. If he expected mercy, he had come to the wrong place. I stood, adjusting my cufflinks. "A job, huh?" He nodded quickly, the desperation in his eyes unmistakable. "Anything. I just need a chance." I pretended to think, pacing behind my desk. You know, Dad, I seem to recall you saying something to me when I was younger. I turned to face him. What was it again? Oh, right, you're a nobody. You'll never make it. He flinched. Nick, But now you need me. I cut in, savoring every second. How ironic. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came. I wasn't going to let him off easy. No, I wanted him to feel every ounce of humiliation he had once made me endure. You know what? I said finally. I would give you a job. His face brightened. Really? I grinned. Yes. You can start as a janitor. His smile faltered. You'll clean floors, take out trash, and report to supervisors younger than you. I continued. It's honest work. And since you always told me to work hard and stop complaining, I expect you to do just that. His expression twisted with shame, but he nodded. I'll take it. Good, I said, walking past him to the door. Your uniform is downstairs. Don't be late. As he left, head bowed, I felt a satisfaction unlike anything else. This wasn't about money. This was justice. But I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. For weeks I watched him. My father, once so proud and untouchable, now mopping floors, scrubbing toilets, and taking orders from people half his age. Every day, he avoided my eyes. Every mistake he made was met with sharp reprimands, just like the ones he used to throw at me. I wanted him to feel it. The helplessness. The humiliation. And then, when I knew he had endured enough, I called him into my office. He stood before me, exhausted, defeated. Did I do something wrong? He asked quietly. I leaned back in my chair. No. In fact, you've done exactly what I expected. He frowned. Then why? You're fired. Silence. His hands trembled. Nick, please. I stood, looking him dead in the eyes. You threw me out without a second thought. Now, I'm doing the same to you. His breath itched, but I felt nothing. No guilt. No sympathy. Just cold satisfaction. As he walked out, shoulders hunched, I finally understood. Revenge wasn't just about getting even. It was about making sure they never forgot. And I knew my father never would.